Bruce Springsteen was quoted saying, "A time comes when you need to stop waiting for the man you want to become and start being the man you want to be." And you could obviously apply that, whether you're a man or woman. And that really brings us back to our part two in our episode on intentional leadership of the Aviation Business Podcast, as we welcome back Sean West of Green Path Advisor to the show. Sean is now, guess you're our first repeat guest. Usually people are listening to me go on, and I think the listeners I do talk to appreciate the brevity of the show, because some people like hour-long podcasts. A lot of them like that 10-minute give or take podcast. And so we wanted to hit on something and do it well, and it's just going to take us 2 episodes to do it. So we've been talking about becoming an intentional leader, and we started in our last episode by discussing 4 main points of becoming an intentional leader. Sean talked about asking the big question, what do you want now for your business? Being clearly defined, what do you really want? Go and do that. And then number 2, having that do it now mentality and taking action steps and being intentional and taking some sort of action steps, because doing nothing gets you nowhere, or it gets you in the reverse direction. So we talked about 2 other points. And with that, I'm just going to kind of come back to you, Sean, and let us just continue this conversation on becoming an intentional leadership. So welcome back, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here. Yeah. In addition to the 2 points you mentioned, the other 2 points are facing our fears and the fear factor. And then also, the 4th point is really focused more on reflection. Are we taking the time to reflect, learn, and grow? So we'll get into that. But first, on the fears, it might seem a little bit strange to say, okay, wait a minute. Talking about my fears is going to help me become more intentional. What I find with business owners is that we're going 180 miles an hour. We're trying to wear all the hats, and some of the things that we're intrinsically potentially worried about or afraid of, we don't really voice that. It doesn't really come out, and we don't oftentimes even give ourselves the opportunity to confront that, to unpack it a little bit. And we all have fears, whether it be fear of failure or even fear of success. We've created this grand vision, a big plan, and on our way there, it kind of hits us that in achieving that big plan for our business, our company's going to be completely different at that point than it is today. And that's a lot of change. And some people, even in being successful in their businesses, aren't quite prepared for the change that success will bring. So there can be a lot of anxiety around that. But we get to choose if our fear or our faith is stronger and which emotion we are choosing to feed. So certainly pressing into good content, having wise counsel around us, those are very good things. But almost more importantly is that internal word track in terms of what are we feeding with, how we're communicating to our teams and how we're communicating to ourselves in those quiet moments about our progress. So, if we commonly worry about things that haven't happened yet or things that are out of our control, those are things that can keep us up at night, can keep us distracted, can keep us from being intentional, and to be a little bit knocked off course. And as we've all probably heard many times over, it just bears repeating, is getting even 1 degree off course with some of these things that happen to us. We're all human. It's not such a big deal today, tomorrow, but in a quarter or in a year, it can take us quite a bit off track from where we wanted to be.
No, it's so good. And you hit on some really good points on the fear factor from really a high level of just, the fear of failure, the fear of success. But how much does this come up for every leader, everyone in business? That fear factor, the call reluctance for sales, having the difficult conversation that really needs to be had with a team member or a key vendor that really has to happen. And if it went well, would really make all the difference. And we don't have those conversations because of the fear we build up in our mind in advance. And then when we do finally get to that point where we have the courage to make the call, we feel so much better afterwards. But how much anxiety and stress did we go through to get to that point? So that fear factor is such a great thing to just keep in perspective, to have that attitude of facing it. So good. Yeah, and it goes into all that do it now and ask what you want. All these things kind of come together into that, step of the journey, right? And that shift as you get ready to say in that fourth point from accidental to intentional. So talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Um, I would say also that, just a reminder, it bears reminding that our emotions follow emotions. And so that's really at the core of that do it now piece that you mentioned. And then also this one, the fourth one, shifting from accidental to intentional, is to really just understand that our actions really lead to our emotions rather than the other way around, and so that helps get past a lot of that. But and so shifting from accidental to intentional really takes a lot of reflection, um, and again, that might seem a paradox, but in the 15 Laws of Growth, John Maxwell states, people have innumerable experiences every day, and many learn nothing from them because they never take the time to pause and reflect. And so shifting our mindset, shifting our day to day, because it's not easy. It's simple, but it's not easy. Business owners are confronted by things every day. I'm confronted by things every day. And so if I want to shift from accidental to intentional, be assured that the day you decide to make that shift and begin on that process, there's going to be some fires to put out. There's going to be some things that are distracting your attention. So it is simple, but not always easy. But one of the keys to making this shift is committing to some type of reflection. And that can be a brief amount of time, but it has to be a consistent amount of time. A business leader that I've coached that really makes value out of a 20-minute time commuting at the end of every day, and has a set of 3 questions that he goes through in that 20-minute drive. The radio's off. It's the only time in the day that nobody's speaking with him. And it's not this idea of a guy in a leather chair, a cup of coffee, pouring out his soul for an hour or hour and a half into a journal, right? I mean, that probably comes to mind for a lot of business owners when you say you need to reflect or journal. No, it can be very meaningful to have a consistent period of time. But that's incredibly important for us to reflect and see what's going well, what's not going well, what should we keep doing, and very importantly, what should we not be doing. And so that leads into a whole nother topic, but those are some of the keys that I've found to this point that really help people make that shift.
Yeah, that's so good. In fact, we've talked about that intentionality of taking time, that business owners and business leaders or team leaders have to be intentional to schedule time for thinking. And I'm struggling with the author's name, but he wrote the book called The Road Less Stupid. And one of his big points, as a known business leader, was that, business leaders have to schedule in thinking time. And I like that idea. Journaling can be a great tool, but it doesn't have to be. Whatever works for you that you can do consistently. And there's that concept of habit stacking that we've talked about a lot in our habits discussions. And so the gentleman you're speaking of stack that, he's got to drive home every day when he goes, and not everyone has that in COVID, so they may have to figure out something. But what is it you do every day that you can allow, or every week, whatever it is that works for you, that allows you that time to be intentional and reflecting, and then deciding what needs to happen in order to go to the next level, right?
Absolutely. And as people are hearing this, driving down the road or whatever you may be doing, I think the big pushback is I'm too busy, right? And so hear that a lot. And it comes back to there's huge value in saying no. If we're too busy to put in this this amount of time or this type of a habit to reflect on what we feel called to do with our lives, then we are too busy, and there needs to be something or many somethings that perhaps we say no to. Warren Buffett says it best: for every 100 opportunities presented to him, he declines 99 of them to focus on the one that leads him to success. So letting go of things can be painful, and especially small and medium-sized business owners are famous for trying to pack more on. It's this idea that we need to be doing more for our customers. We do need to be doing more, always adding to the business. Sometimes it is very refreshing to take things away that are a burden to you and that your customers may not value the way you think they do. So taking yourself through a process of what you could be saying no to can be hugely valuable.
That's so good. So we can take our leadership, we can take our businesses to a higher altitude by becoming more intentional leaders who ask that big question of what do we want for our business? What do we need for our business? Developing that do it now mentality and establishing healthy rhythms around that, facing the fear factor and shifting from the accidental to intentional. And Sean, with that, thank you for being here. If someone wants to reach out to you and ask more about this, what's the best way to connect with you?
My email would be the best. It's Sean, sean.west@greenpathadvisor.com.
All right. Well, thanks again. And we look forward to connecting with you guys on our next episode. Until then, keep your wheels up and your attitude high. Okay. Well, here's your aviation fun fact for the day. And today we're going back to April 18th of 1917. And on that day in aviation history, William Edward Boeing renamed his Pacific Aero Products Company, calling it the Boeing Airplane Company. Boeing's company would go on to design and build some of the most important military and civilian aircraft the world has ever known. And most of you have flown on a Boeing at some point in your life, if not on a very regular basis. So pretty monumental date, April 18th, 1917. Boeing Company gets its official name. And that's your aviation fun fact for today. Until next time, keep your wheels up and your attitude high.
Thanks for listening to the Aviation Business Podcast. If you found this episode of value, please share with someone who could benefit from its content. You can stay up to date by subscribing in iTunes or your podcast player of choice. This episode is brought to you by Aris Insurance Solutions, your flight plan for navigating the turbulence in aviation insurance. To find out more, go to arisinsurance.com. That's AERIS insurance.com.